I don't know how much to go into it, but I run a time bank in Lee Green. Lewisham Council have contracted with an organisation called Spice, who will produce a currency that will, in my case, be backed by the possibility of swaps in the time bank, and in their case, the incentives for people volunteering, they're, I think, looking at spare capacity and leisure services. What do you think about the multiplicity of local currencies? I mean, they all have to have an exchange rate, presumably, or be based on a pound. So, should there be lots of different local currencies? And also, Brixton Council, they may not follow through on this, but they're backing it, and they said you might be able to earn parking permits. So that would be something that they would accept, the credits for parking permits. I know it's all got a bit confused to me.
It definitely does. When you have different local currencies and you want to have what we call intertrading, it definitely can get quite confusing. But I think there's a lot of value in having a range of schemes. Time banking, mutual credit and spare capacity schemes have benefits, and they sometimes reach areas of the community that other schemes might not. They're obviously particularly good for reaching the financially excluded, because you don't have to put sterling in at the start to get some benefit. At the Brixton Pound, we quite like the idea that basically we have plans with the council to scale things up to support their cooperative council model, and potentially even in the future maybe create something called the Land Pound, which would have a kind of federation of local schemes. There's definitely a possibility that you can try and integrate these schemes, and for example you can plug spare capacity in and allow people to accrue e-currency credit in that way. Yes, you have to think about exchange rates. Yes, it's complicated, but it's certainly not impossible. I think that the challenge usually is, if you take 2 or 3 different schemes that are run by completely different organisations, is trying to see if they all share a common goal, and you can somehow agree the mechanics. But I think there's a lot of value in that, and as I said earlier, you know, having only a sterling-backed complementary currency definitely isn't the sole possibility, and perhaps not even the best one.
What about issues with tax, sort of businesses' income tax, or whatever you call it?
Sure. So this is a common theme that people talk about. There's actually no difference whatsoever for a business or indeed for an individual in terms of tax position. It doesn't matter whether you're paid in luncheon vouchers, Brixton Pounds, sterling, or anything else. HMRC sees them all as equal, and it will tax you on that basis. So schemes like this are not tax avoidance schemes, any more than being paid in cash is. Okay, sure. If you pay me in cash, I might decide to put it in my back pocket and not declare that. But it doesn't matter what kind of cash there is. Again, in the eyes of the law and the HMRC, a physical note like the Brixton Pound is merely a voucher, so it's the equivalent of cash. So it doesn't change anything.
I've heard stories about issues with benefits and whether income through let schemes and things like that counts as income as far as benefits are concerned as well.
This is definitely an issue, and it's something we have to think about very carefully once we start plugging into the cooperative council model. I think if I understand this correctly, and I'm not an expert, the general premise is if you can take that credit and exchange it back into sterling, then yes, in terms of benefits, then you have to declare it, and it could be an issue. If if it's non-exchangeable, then there shouldn't be a problem. So, for example, there are all sorts of schemes in operation. Loyalty points at supermarkets is one where, if you notice, they're always very careful to put on the bottom the cash value of this is 0.0 or something infinitesimally low. And that's basically to get around this kind of issues. So, yeah, the key thing is making it non-exchangeable. And again, with an electronic currency or any type of electronic credit, you can do that because you can restrict who can exchange back.
Was it pretty difficult setting up the electronic stuff?
So we were very lucky to be able to work with a foundation in the Netherlands called Coin, who I actually now work for. Very interest there, who were experts in setting up schemes of this sort, and we managed to get some funding. There's a small group of about 5 organisations secured some funding from the Tudor Trust and a few other places. And the idea was that we would create a platform that could be useful to other local currency schemes of any kind. So the platform that was created, that's currently being used in Brixton, is also about to be rolled out in Bristol for a kind of county-wide scheme that they're launching in May, which is very exciting. And we're hoping to see it rolled out in a few other places, both in Europe and maybe the UK. So we had considerable support to do it this last because we're also lucky that there's an open source piece of software called Cycloss, which is very well developed and in use all around the world, and that gave us a very stable and secure platform that we could start with and then customize. At the end of the day, it's a financial system, so you can't mess around.
Yeah.
I think I'm a bit confused now since we were talking about the Kentucky thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, did you start out in terms of supporting the business, or was it primarily to balance out other sort of banking systems, which I presume is?
So, I mean, really all these aims are intertwined. I mean, if you support local independent businesses, then potentially, yes, because of the local multiplier effect, you can create more value and more economic resilience in your community. Your bank is very unlikely to have any desire to do that because, unfortunately, all our banking in the UK is global based, it's global brands, with the exception of 1 or 2 building societies that are truly still mutuals. And those banks simply don't really have any interest in local communities. Their aim is to make profit for their shareholders. So by supporting local independent businesses and providing an alternative to those banks, it kind of all merges into the same aim, if you like.
I just have the feeling that the bigger you grow, it will just not be local independent business. There will be local business.
Not really. I think that the important thing there is that I think when you start a scheme of this sort, you have to look at the area that you're going to operate in and make sure that area is large enough that you can have a range of every type of business and service, because then you can create a completely functioning financial ecosystem without having to involve any national or international brands. Certainly there are plenty of examples of this that work quite well. There are some large schemes in Germany, Switzerland, the United States that have proved this very successfully. The challenge is if you were to go for a very tiny area and you simply find that there are not enough independent businesses, so for example, you can't find, let's think of a good example, if you can't find a hardware shop that's not B&Q, for example, or you can't find someone that makes bread that's not a national chain. But as long as you have everything covered and you have enough divergence of businesses, then there's no reason why it can't work.
Yeah, it's just like if, let's say Tesco or Kentucky Fried Chicken, they just say, okay, we'll just accept your currency, then they'll just be part of that. Like, there's no stop.
They can do that with the cash, but again, that's why our focus at the moment is very much on the e-currency, really, because that's the system that we can control and mould in an entirely different way. Also, I think for an outfit like Tesco, they have very little interest in being involved with a scheme like the Brixton Pound, apart from maybe the PR angle. I mean, there's not really any value in it for them.
But the stronger you grow, they will eventually lose money. Potentially, I guess.
Potentially, yeah. I think in a way that would be a good outcome for us. But you have to look at scale. I mean, if a scheme like the Brixton Pound got to the stage where it was turning over a few million in the equivalent of sterling every year, even then you'd probably find that it's having a positive economic impact, but I doubt that it would do much to dent the sales at somewhere like Tesco. Not enough, but yeah. But the important thing is, as you said, to try and address the balance, because at the moment, national and global chains really hold all the advantages, and local independent businesses hold none. So a scheme like ours is really just giving them back